So the topic for this biweekly synthesis assignment 2 focuses on the person versus situation debate. So if you're on the person side of the debate, you believe that a person's personality is pretty consistent across situations and doesn't really change over time. But if you're on the situation side, you would believe that people are not consistent across situations in their life, so they can display a variety of different traits. And instead of just set personality traits, situations actually might be a better predictor of how people. So the first reading from McAdams and Olson, The Personality Development, Continuity, and Change Over the Life Course, explains that personality develops in 3 different ways across our lifespan. So you could be looking at it from the person side, which is a collection of your traits, the agent, which is adaptations in your character, and then the person as an author, so the stories of life and your experiences in life that shape who you are. So we know that personality develops across the course of human life in a very complex way. And over the course of one's life, your motives, your goals, and your characteristics definitely change. So this could occur when you experience adolescence and young adulthood. I guess an example of this would be like middle adulthood, where individuals show a commitment to family and community ties. The next reading is from Correa Chavez and Rogoff. Cultural research has transformed our ideas of cognitive development. So this article focuses on the sociocultural historical theory, which is that development depends on social engagement with others. So people learn to think as they communicate and socialize in their culture and their communities. It picks up on 2 different unique processes for organizing learning and attention. So that is intent participation and assembly line instruction, whereas intent participation would be children as observers and they're included in their community, with things like contributing to something like the only older people would contribute to, per se. They have the ability to contribute. And then assembly line instruction is where children are taught by specific members, designated members, or leaders. They're not quite collaborative with other learners in a facilitation setting. So this could be like a school setting, I think is the example they provided. So you see this like difference in indigenous children who more so learn in a intent participation environment, and European American children who would learn more in the assembly line instruction. So the next article kind of was the Stanford Prison Experiment from the National Geographic website, and this takes a deep dive into the person versus situation debate to find if like guards have personalities that are sadistic towards prisoners, or if the situation at hand, being a prison guard, would create this kind of brutality that we see in prisons all across the world. So we have 24 college volunteers that are perfectly normal and healthy, separated into guards and prisoners in a simulated prison environment. And the outcome is that the guards end up asserting a great amount of power and violence over these prisoners, assuming this power role. And the volunteer prisoners began to fall into the role of being a prisoner at the same time. So it became a super hostile situation and did present a lot of psychological effects on some of the prisoners. I've actually watched a movie on the Stanford Prison Experiment and learned about it in the past, and one of the most fascinating things to me still is how the prisoners were so like deprived because of the things that the guards were doing to them, and they really like assumed such a role of a prisoner that they were forgetting their name and actually assuming the identity of their prison number. So like being called the prison number over and over again, they just kind of like forgot, who they actually were and identified themselves with the number, which I thought was really scary. So what this experiment showed is that the guards who were treating the prisoners with such brutality weren't actually bad people. They were just put into a pretty bad situation, and they asserted the role that they thought they had to. So they did things that they thought were right, being a person of power, especially a prison guard, like shouting orders at prisoners, making them march in a line, or any kind of physical like violence towards the prisoners. So they assumed just this stereotypical role of a violent prison guard in this simulated prison environment. So the next article we read was revisiting the Sanford prison experiment. So could participant self-selection have led to the cruelty? So the study is looking at, just something like this where people have the ability to self-select themselves. Would it allow people who have predisposed aggression or hostility to volunteer themselves? And if so, what's the implication of this? So the study is really heavily suggesting interactionalism, where the individuals might have volunteered because of the fit to their personalities. Like, you're not going to volunteer to do a study that you don't really have an interest in. Like, I would never do a study on playing video games because that's just not something I like to do. But I would volunteer to do a study if we were picking out, like, a new candle scent for a company or a new laundry detergent. So, there was a pretest given to them to rule out, make sure that they were fit mentally and, like, with family history and stuff, or even people who might be criminals. And the guards and prisoners were picked randomly. But the authors of the study do agree that interactionalism is present in these situations where individuals are self-selecting because they're making judgments on how the studies would fit their lifestyle and values. So the last article is Persistent Dispositionalism and Interactionist Clothing. So this article kind of explains the dangers of dispositionalism thinking and research. So where too often the role of the situation is understated, and instead focus on dispositions are emphasized, especially in the prison systems. So you hear that, like, prisons are so bad, the people there are evil, they're all wrong, and you're not looking at how the particular situation kind of creates maybe a more violent environment. So we know that people's free choices are constrained by situations, so situations do greatly impact choice and behavior. The authors of this argue that the deterioration of prison systems and life of prisoners occurs from a facilitated kind of abuse, so that the higher up, more powerful people, such as guards or administration, see these people in such a degrading way, so there's a stereotype created to treat them in such a way. So it's kind of just this institutionalized cycle of abuse and violence that they want to